The storm. Snow had a way of swallowing sound, not muting it completely, no. It simply softened the world until everything felt distant, dreamlike, as though reality itself had been buried beneath layers of white silence. Adrian Vale had always hated that silence. Most people imagined snow as peaceful, beautiful, pure. But Adrian knew better. Snow concealed things. Roads disappeared beneath it. Forests became endless labyrinths. Men vanished into it without leaving so much as a scream behind. And memories looked different in snow. The windshield wipers dragged slowly across the glass as Adrian drove deeper into the northern wilderness. Beyond the beams of his headlights, the forest stretched endlessly into darkness. Black pine trees standing like thin cathedral spires beneath the storm clouds. The road sign beside him was nearly buried. Mile 17. Only the number remained visible beneath the snow. Adrian glanced at it briefly before returning his eyes to the road. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The old man at the gas station had mentioned that marker earlier that afternoon. He could still remember the exact way the man had stared at him. Not curious, not friendly, worried. "You heading north tonight?" the old man had asked while handing him his receipt. Adrian nodded. Survey work. The man looked toward the dark windows outside. Snow was already beginning to fall then. "You should stop before mile 17. Adrian had almost smiled. People in remote villages always had stories. Forest spirits, missing hikers, ghost roads. He had heard variations of them his entire career. "What happens at mile 17? Adrian asked casually. The old man hesitated for too long. Then he answered quietly. "The storm remembers people there." Adrian never responded. He simply grabbed his coffee and left. Now hours later, those words returned to him, like frost creeping beneath a door. The storm remembers people there. The road narrowed sharply as the snow intensified. Thick flakes crashed against the windshield and violent waves illuminated by the headlights like swarming white insects. The GPS mounted beside him flickered, recalculating. Then the screen went black for a moment before returning. Adrian sighed. Perfect. The radio dissolved into static. He reached toward it instinctively, twisting the knob, but only fragments of distant voices emerged beneath the crackling interference. Outside, the forest grew denser. He checked the time. 1241 a.m. Too late to turn back now. The nearest town was nearly 3 hours behind him. He adjusted his scarf and focused on the road ahead. Then he saw someone standing among the trees. Adrian's breath caught immediately. A figure. Tall. Motionless. Half concealed behind the snowfall. His headlights swept across it for barely a second before the road curved again, but it was enough. Someone had been there. He slowed the vehicle instinctively. The tires crunched against ice beneath the snow. When he looked back through the side mirror, there was nothing behind him except white darkness. His pulse quickened slightly. Probably a tree trunk, or exhaustion. He had been driving nearly 7 hours. Still, it had looked human. The storm worsened another 20 minutes later. Visibility collapsed almost entirely. Snow hammered against the windshield so violently that Adrian could barely distinguish road from forest anymore. Then the engine light flickered. Once. Twice. His stomach tightened. No. The vehicle jerked beneath him. The headlights dimmed briefly before stabilizing. Then the engine coughed again. Adrian cursed under his breath. He eased the truck forward carefully until the tires suddenly slid sideways across hidden ice. The world lurched violently. For one horrifying second, Adrian lost control entirely. The truck spun halfway toward the forest before slamming into a snowbank with enough force to throw him against the door. Silence followed. Heavy breathing filled the cabin. Adrian stared forward, heart pounding violently inside his chest. Snow drifted slowly across the headlights outside. The engine had died. He tried restarting it immediately. Nothing. Again. Only a weak clicking sound answered him. "Come on!" The storm outside screamed against the vehicle like an animal. Adrian leaned back slowly, pressing trembling fingers against his eyes. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. He checked his phone. No signal. Of course. For several moments he simply sat there listening to the wind. Then he noticed something strange. Light. Very faint. Somewhere between the trees ahead. Adrian frowned. At first he assumed it was another vehicle, but the glow remained perfectly still. Warm yellow light. His eyes narrowed. A cabin. Out here. He grabbed his flashlight immediately. The cold hit him like a knife the moment he stepped outside. Wind tore across the road, with terrifying force, instantly covering his boots in snow. Adrian pulled his coat tighter and aimed the flashlight toward the trees. There. Definitely light. Not far away either. Maybe a few 100 meters. Relief spread through him faster than he expected. Someone lived out here after all. Maybe they had a radio. Or at least heat. He pushed into the forest. Snow reached nearly to his knees in some places. Branches groaned overhead beneath the storm while darkness pressed heavily between the trees. Yet the light remained visible the entire time, like it was waiting for him. Eventually, the cabin emerged from the blizzard. Adrian stopped walking immediately. Something about it felt wrong. The structure was old. Extremely old. Dark wood, nearly black with age. The roof sagged slightly beneath thick snow while smoke drifted lazily from the chimney into the storm above. Warm yellow light glowed through frosted windows, but there were no tracks outside. None. Not a single footprint. Adrian slowly approached the porch. The snow here was untouched. Completely untouched. His instincts stirred uneasily. Still, freezing to death outside was not exactly a better option. He climbed the wooden steps carefully. The porch creaked beneath his weight. Then he knocked. No answer. He waited. Only wind replied. Adrian tried again louder this time. Still nothing. His eyes drifted toward the window. Inside, firelight flickered warmly across wooden walls. The cabin was clearly occupied. Unless whoever lived there had stepped out recently. Adrian hesitated before trying the handle. The door opened immediately. Warmth flooded over him. Real warmth. The kind that instantly made frozen fingers ache. Adrian stepped inside slowly. The cabin smelled of smoked cedar wood and something faintly metallic beneath it all. The fireplace crackled quietly in the corner. A kettle hung above the flames. And sitting atop the wooden table nearby was a bowl of soup, still steaming. Adrian stared at it silently. Someone had been here moments ago. "Hello," he called. Nothing. The cabin consisted of one main room, and a narrow hallway disappearing deeper into darkness. Old furniture lined the walls. Shelves filled with dusty books. A lantern, hanging from a beam overhead. Everything looked untouched by time, like the entire place had been frozen decades earlier. Another gust of wind rattled the windows violently. Adrian removed his gloves slowly. "This isn't creepy at all," he muttered to himself. His voice sounded unnaturally small inside the cabin. He moved toward the fire first, extending numb hands toward the heat. Relief spread painfully through his body. Then his eyes landed on the object, resting at the center of the table. A journal. Dark leather binding. Worn with age. Adrian stared at it for a moment before picking it up. The cover had no title, only scratches. He opened it carefully. Most pages were filled with names, dates, short entries written in shaky handwriting. December 11th, Elias Morton. February 3rd, Clara Vane. January 17th, Thomas Reed. Some entries included only a single sentence. He heard knocking outside. She tried to leave before sunrise. The storm followed him back. Adrian frowned uneasily. What the hell? The handwriting became more frantic toward the later pages. Messages written over other messages. Words scratched so hard they tore through the paper. Then Adrian reached the final page and froze. Only one sentence had been written there. Fresh ink. Still dark. He finally came back. Adrian's blood turned cold. A loud creak echoed somewhere deeper inside the cabin. He looked up instantly. Silence. Then another sound. Slow footsteps. Somewhere down the hallway, Adrian stood motionless. "Hello?" No response. The footsteps stopped. His pulse hammered violently now. The hallway beyond the firelight looked impossibly dark. Adrian grabbed the lantern from the table instinctively. "Listen," he called again, forcing calm into his voice. "My truck crashed outside. I'm not looking for trouble." Nothing answered him. Then knock. Adrian nearly dropped the lantern. The sound came from the front door. 3 slow knocks. He turned toward it immediately. Someone was outside. Relief flooded him again. Jesus Christ. He hurried toward the door and pulled it open. The storm roared violently beyond the porch, but there was nobody there. Only darkness. Only snow. Adrian stared out into the blizzard, confused. Then he looked down. Footprints. Dozens of them. Fresh footprints surrounding the cabin, not leading toward it, leading away from it, into the forest, as though a crowd of people had stood outside watching the cabin, before walking together into the darkness. The cabin. Adrian Vale did not move for several seconds. The door remained open before him, and the storm pushed into the cabin with a savage breath scattering flakes of snow across the wooden floor. Beyond the porch, the forest was nearly invisible, nothing but black trunks and white violence. Yet, the footprints were there. Dozens of them pressed deep into the snow surrounding the cabin, like the remains of some silent congregation. They led away into the trees. Not toward the cabin. Away. As though a crowd had been standing outside, waiting, watching, listening to him breathe. Then all at once the wind slammed the door against the wall. Adrian flinched and stepped back. The lantern in his hand shook hard enough to make the flame tremble. He grabbed the door and forced it shut, sliding the iron latch into place with a sound that seemed far too small against the storm. For a moment he stood, with his back against the door, breathing through his teeth. Think he whispered. That was what he had always done. When the world became uncertain, Adrian became methodical. Measure the land, read the map, trust numbers, distance, direction. Fear was only useful if it sharpened the mind. But there was no measurement for what he had just seen. No reasonable calculation for a cabin with no tracks leading to it. A fire already burning, soup still steaming, and a journal that seemed to know he had arrived. He turned slowly toward the table. The journal lay open where he had dropped it. He finally came back. Adrian stared at the sentence until the words seemed to shift beneath the weak lantern light. Came back. Not arrived. Back. A sound creaked from the hallway again. This time, it was closer. Adrian lifted the lantern. The hallway looked longer than before. He was certain of it. When he first entered, it had seemed narrow and short-ending in darkness, after perhaps 10 feet. Now the black corridor stretched farther, swallowed by shadows that the lantern could not reach. Along the left wall, he could see the outline of a door he had not noticed earlier. His throat tightened. "Hello," the cabin answered with silence. Then something moved behind the door. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft shift of weight, like someone leaning close from the other side. Adrian's body went cold. He stepped backward, but the floorboard beneath him groaned. The sound seemed to travel through the entire cabin. From behind the door came a whisper, so faint he almost convinced himself it was the wind. Adrian. His name. The lantern slipped slightly in his grip. "No," he said, though he did not know who he was speaking to. The whisper came again. "Adrian." It was a woman's voice. Soft. Broken. Familiar in a way that made grief rise inside him before memory could explain why. Adrian moved toward the hallway despite every instinct telling him not to. His boots pressed into the old wooden floor. One step, then another. The air grew colder as he approached the door, as though the fire behind him had ceased to exist. He reached for the handle. The voice whispered again, "Don't leave me." Adrian froze. A pain opened in his chest so suddenly that he almost gasped. Those words. He knew those words. But from where his fingers touched the handle, then a violent bang exploded against the front door behind him. Adrian spun around. Another bang. Then another. The whole cabin shook. Something outside was pounding against the door with open hands. Adrian stumbled backward into the main room lantern, raised like a useless weapon. "Who's there?" he shouted. The banging stopped. A second later, there came 3 gentle knocks. Knock. 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 Exactly like before. Adrian did not answer. The fire crackled. Snow hissed against the windows. His heartbeat thudded so loudly it seemed to fill the room. Then a voice spoke from the other side of the door. An old man's voice. "You should not have opened the book." Adrian's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" A pause. "The same as you." Adrian stepped closer, but not close enough to touch the latch. "What does that mean?" The old man laughed softly. It was not a cruel laugh. It was worse than cruel. It sounded tired. "It means the storm has already chosen where to put you." Adrian grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and held it tight. "I'm armed." "No," the old man replied. "You are afraid." Adrian said nothing. Outside, the voice lowered. "Do not trust the hallway. Do not trust the rooms. And whatever speaks in the voice of someone you loved, do not answer it." The last word struck Adrian with strange force. Someone you loved. Eleanor. The name came to him like a match struck in a dark church. Eleanor. For 1 second he saw her face pale beneath winter light. Dark hair caught beneath a wool scarf. Eyes full of the quiet sadness she tried to hide with kindness. Then the image vanished. Adrian squeezed his eyes shut. His wife. His dead wife. She had been gone. For years. Hadn't she? The memory blurred at the edges. He remembered her laugh. Her hands. The way she touched the side of his face when she wanted him to stop pretending he was fine. But her death. When he tried to remember her death, his mind recoiled. There was snow there. Screaming metal. Blood on glass. Then, nothing. "Open the door," Adrian demanded. "Let me see you." "No." "Why?" "Because if you see me clearly, you may remember too quickly." Adrian's grip tightened around the poker. "I don't understand any of this." "You will." The voice faded into the storm. Adrian waited several seconds before moving to the window. He wiped frost from the glass with his sleeve and peered outside. At the edge of the trees stood an old man. Thin. Almost skeletal. His coat hung from his frame like wet funeral cloth. Snow gathered on his shoulders and white beard, yet he did not shiver. His face was too pale, his eyes too dark. He raised one hand, not in greeting, in warning. Then he turned and disappeared among the pines. Adrian stepped back from the window. The cabin groaned. A deep wooden moan passed through the walls as though the structure were alive and shifting in its sleep. Behind him down the hallway, a door opened. Slowly, Adrian turned. The door that had not existed moments ago now stood ajar. A faint golden light spilled from within, and from inside came the smell of lavender, Eleanor's perfume. Adrian felt his knees weaken. "No," he whispered again, but this time the word was not rejection. It was pleading. He moved toward the room. The hallway had grown longer still. The walls were lined with framed photographs, now dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Men, women, children, some dressed in old clothes from another century, others in modern winter coats. Some smiled uncertainly. Others stared at the camera with hollow, frightened eyes. Adrian lifted the lantern closer to one photograph. A young woman stood beside a broken sled. Beneath the frame carved into the wood was a name. Clara Vane. February 3 RD. He recognized the name from the journal. He moved to another photograph. Thomas Reed. January 17 TH. Another. Elias Morton. December 11 TH. All names from the book. All trapped here. All remembered by the cabin. At the end of the hallway, the open door waited. The lavender smell grew stronger. Adrian stepped inside. It was not a room in the cabin. It was his bedroom. Not exactly as it had been, but as memory had preserved it, warm dim with pale curtains and the old brass lamp Eleanor had bought from a market in Prague. Snow tapped against the window, though outside there should have been forest. On the bed lay Eleanor's blue scarf. Adrian stared at it. His breath trembled. He had buried that scarf with her. Or had he... A voice came from behind him. "You kept driving." Adrian turned so fast, the lantern nearly went out. Eleanor stood near the window. Not decayed. Not monstrous. Not like a ghost from a story. She looked exactly as he remembered her on the last winter night of their marriage. Beautiful. Tired. Impossibly sad. Her dark hair fell over one shoulder. Her lips were pale. Blood marked one side of her forehead in a thin red line. Adrian could not speak. Eleanor looked at him with eyes full of hurt. "You said you would come back." His chest collapsed inward. "I don't know what you mean." Her expression did not change. "You always say that when remembering hurts." The room flickered. For one instant, the bedroom vanished. Adrian saw the inside of a car, a cracked windshield, snow pouring through broken glass. Eleanor trapped beside him, her leg pinned beneath twisted metal, her voice weak and terrified. "Adrian, please." Then the vision snapped away. He was back in the cabin room, gasping. Eleanor was closer now. "You heard me," she whispered. Adrian shook his head violently. "No. No. I tried to save you." "Did you?" The question was quiet. That made it unbearable. Adrian backed away. "I don't remember." The walls began to darken. Frost crept across the bedroom window from the outside, spreading like pale veins. Eleanor's face softened. "That is why the storm brought you back." A loud crash sounded from somewhere behind the walls. Adrian ran. He did not think. He fled the room down the impossible hallway, past the photographs of the dead, back toward the firelit main room. But when he reached the cabin's center, the front door was gone. Only a wooden wall remained where it had been. Adrian stopped. His breathing became wild. No. 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 He ran his hands across the wall, searching for seams, hinges, anything. Nothing. The cabin had sealed itself. Behind him, the journal on the table began turning pages by itself. Fast at first, then slower. One page, another, until it stopped near the end. Adrian approached it with dread. The final page had changed. His name was now written there. Adrian Vale. Beneath it, one line: he left her in the snow. Adrian slammed the journal shut. The fire roared suddenly, rising high and bright, throwing his shadow across the walls like a hanged man. A scream tore through the cabin. A woman's scream. Eleanor's scream. It came from under the floor. Adrian staggered backward. The sound became louder, roar, filled with pain. So human and terrible that tears sprang into his eyes before he understood them. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop!" The scream ended instantly. Then silence. After several seconds, the old man's voice came from the window. "The cabin shows only what is already inside you." Adrian turned slowly. The old man stood outside the glass again. Snow blew through him as though he were not fully solid. Adrian's voice broke. "What is this place?" The old man leaned closer to the window. "The place beyond mile 17. That isn't an answer. It is the only answer we get." Adrian swallowed hard. "We." The old man smiled faintly. Then he lifted one pale finger and pointed toward the journal. Adrian did not want to look, but he did. The book was open again. A new sentence had appeared beneath his name. Death date January 17th. Adrian stared. His mind went empty. "That's today," he whispered. The old man shook his head slowly from outside. "No, Adrian." His voice became almost gentle. "That was 17 years ago." The room tilted. Adrian grabbed the table to keep from falling. 17 years. No. Impossible. He was 34. He had work, a truck, a hotel reservation, a life waiting somewhere beyond the storm. But when he tried to picture that life clearly, it dissolved. Faces with no names. Places with no doors. Years made of fog. Only Eleanor remained sharp. Eleanor in snow. Eleanor reaching for him. Eleanor begging him not to leave. Adrian stumbled toward the wall where the front door had been. He struck it once with the iron poker. Then again. Wood splintered. A thin line of freezing air cut through the cabin. He struck harder, screaming now not from courage but from panic. The wall cracked. Wind burst through. With one final blow, part of the wood collapsed outward, revealing the storm beyond. Adrian threw himself through the opening. Snow swallowed him instantly. He ran, or tried to. The forest stretched before him in every direction, black and endless. Branches clawed at his coat. Wind shoved him sideways. Snow blinded him. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs weakened, until the cabin light vanished behind him. Then, through the storm ahead, he saw a warm yellow glow. Adrian stopped. No. The glow grew clearer. A cabin. Old wood. Sagging roof. Smoke curling from the chimney. The same cabin. Waiting. Adrian fell to his knees in the snow. Above the door, carved deeply into the wood, were 4 words that had not been there before you died here. Beyond mile 17. Adrian Vale remained on his knees in the snow, staring at the words carved above the cabin door. You died here. The storm moved around him like a living thing. It circled through the black pines, bent the trees, clawed at his coat, and filled his mouth with ice every time he tried to breathe. The warm yellow light from the cabin window flickered softly across the snow, almost gentle, almost welcoming. But Adrian understood now. The light was not safety. It was a lure. For years, perhaps, for lifetimes, he had been walking toward it. He tried to stand, but his legs refused him. His hands sank into the snow, and beneath the cold, he felt something hard. Glass. He brushed the snow aside. A shard of windshield lay half buried beneath his palm. Then another. Then twisted black metal. His breath stopped. The snow around the cabin was not untouched anymore. It was opening itself, revealing what it had hidden for 17 years. A broken car lay buried beneath the drift. His car. Not the truck he remembered driving that night. Not the vehicle parked uselessly by the road. The old car. Dark blue. Crushed against a pine tree. Its front end, folded like paper. Adrian staggered backward. "No!" The storm answered with a scream of wind. And then memory came. Not gently. Not in pieces. It arrived, like a door being kicked open inside his skull. He saw the road at mile 17. 17 years earlier. He was younger then, but not by much in the way grief counts years. Eleanor sat beside him, wrapped in her blue scarf, her hand resting on the window glass as snow passed through the headlights. They had been arguing. Not loudly at first. That made it worse. Quiet words. Sharp silences. The kind of sadness that had lived between them for months, growing colder every day. "You don't speak to me anymore," Eleanor had said. Adrian remembered gripping the steering wheel. "I'm tired, Eleanor. You are always tired. I work. You disappear." The road had narrowed. Snow fell harder. He remembered her turning toward him, her eyes shining in the dim dashboard light. "I don't need a perfect husband, Adrian. I just need you to stay. Stay." That word. It had terrified him more than any storm, because Adrian had spent his whole life surviving by leaving. Leaving rooms before conversations became honest. Leaving love before it could ask anything of him. Leaving pain before it could name him. He had looked away from her. Just 1 second. One stupid, fatal second. The tires slipped. The car spun. Eleanor screamed. Then the world became metal glass and white silence. Adrian collapsed in the snow outside the cabin, clutching his head. The memory did not stop. He saw himself waking inside the wreck. Blood ran into one eye. The windshield was shattered. Wind poured into the car. Eleanor was beside him, pinned beneath the crushed dashboard. She was alive. Barely. Adrian. Her voice had been small. Terrified. He tried the door. It opened with a scream of bent metal. He stumbled into the snow. "Adrian, please." "I'll get help," he had said. But there had been no help. No houses, no lights. Only forest. Only storm. He had taken 3 steps away from the car. Then 5. Then 10. Her voice followed him. "Don't leave me." He had turned back once. The car was already half hidden by snow. Eleanor reached one hand through the broken window. He remembered seeing that hand. White fingers trembling. And then he remembered the worst truth of all. He had not gone for help. He had run because he was afraid. Afraid of watching her die. Afraid of dying beside her. Afraid that love at the very end would ask him for courage he did not have. So he ran. And the storm took him too. Not far from the wreck. Not heroically. Not meaningfully. He had fallen beneath the pines, exhausted and bleeding, calling her name only after it was too late to matter. Adrian lowered his hands slowly. The cabin stood before him, quiet now. The door opened by itself. Warmth spilled across the snow. Inside, Eleanor waited. She stood near the fireplace, the blue scarf around her neck, the thin line of blood still marking her forehead. She looked neither angry nor monstrous. That was the cruelty of it. She looked human. Wounded. Patient. Adrian entered the cabin like a man walking toward judgment. The door closed behind him. For the first time, the cabin did not creak. It did not shift. The hallway did not stretch. The walls did not whisper. It waited. Eleanor looked at him. "Now you remember." Adrian could barely lift his eyes. Yes. The word broke apart in his mouth. He expected her to scream at him, to accuse him, to become the thing his guilt had shaped for 17 years. But she only asked the question he had feared since the first knock at the door. "Why did you leave me?" Adrian's face twisted. There were answers a coward could give. The storm was too strong. "I was injured. I thought I could find help." I panicked. All of them were true. None of them were the truth. He lowered himself into the chair beside the table, the same table where the journal lay open. I was afraid, he whispered. Eleanor did not move. I heard you calling me, he continued. I heard you begging. And I still walked away. His voice shook harder now. I told myself I was going for help. I told myself I would come back. But somewhere inside me I knew I was leaving because I could not bear to stay and suffer with you. A tear fell onto the wooden floor. I loved you, but I loved my own fear more. For a long time Eleanor said nothing. The fire burned low. Then she stepped closer. I waited, she said. Adrian closed his eyes. I know. No, she said softly. You don't. He looked up. Her expression held sorrow, older than anger. I waited in the car until I could no longer feel my hands. I waited when the glass froze red. I waited when your footprints disappeared. I waited because some part of me believed you would turn back. Adrian sobbed once, painfully, and after I died, she continued. I waited here. The cabin trembled faintly. Around them the walls filled with whispers, not threatening now, but grieving. All the lost names in the journal. Clara Vane, Thomas Reed, Elias Morton, the old man outside the window. Every soul the storm had kept. All of us wait for something, Eleanor said. For rescue. For forgiveness. For someone to admit the thing they buried. Adrian looked toward the window. The old man stood beyond the glass watching. His face was sad, not cruel. Who is he? Adrian asked. A man who left his brother in the snow, Eleanor said. He has been here longer than us. Adrian turned back to her. Can we leave? Eleanor's eyes softened. You can. He stared at her. What about you? I was never the one holding the door shut. The word struck him deeper than any scream. Adrian looked at the journal. His name remained on the final page. Adrian Vale. January 17. He left her in the snow. With trembling hands, he reached for the pen beside the book. The ink was dark, heavy, almost alive. He wrote beneath the sentence, and he came back too late. The cabin shuddered. The fire went out. For one terrible second, darkness swallowed everything. Then Eleanor took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but real. The front door appeared again. Beyond it, the storm was dying. Not stopping suddenly. Not vanishing like a trick. Dying. The wind softened. Snowflakes drifted instead of attacked. Between the trees, the black sky began to pale with the faintest suggestion of dawn. Adrian had not seen dawn in 17 years. He stepped onto the porch with Eleanor beside him. The snow before them was covered with footprints. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. All leading from the cabin into the forest. The lost were leaving. One by one, pale figures emerged from the trees and walked into the growing light. Some were children, some were old. Some wore clothes from another century. Some looked newly dead, still confused, still afraid. The old man passed Adrian on the porch. He paused. You were lucky, he said. Adrian looked at him through tears. No, Adrian whispered. I was forgiven. The old man gave a faint smile. Then he walked toward the dawn. Adrian turned to Eleanor. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then, at last, she touched his face the way she used to when he was pretending not to hurt. I know. The cabin behind them began to collapse into snowlight. Its walls loosened into mist. Its windows dimmed. The journal on the table fluttered open one final time, pages turning faster and faster until all the names faded from the paper. Adrian held Eleanor's hand tighter. Will it hurt, he asked. She looked toward the horizon. No more than remembering. Together they walked beyond mile 17. The snow beneath their feet did not make a sound. By sunrise, the cabin was gone. Only the road remained. A patrol team found the wreck 3 days later after an unusual thaw cleared part of the forest near the old mile marker. The report mentioned 2 bodies recovered from a vehicle believed to have crashed 17 years earlier. The names were Adrian Vale and Eleanor Vale. No cabin was found. No footprints. No journal. Only one thing troubled the lead officer. On the inside of the broken windshield, written through frost that should not have been fresh, were 4 words. We are going home. Months later, in the heart of another winter, a young driver took the northern road during a snowstorm. His GPS failed near mile 17. His radio dissolved into static. And just when fear began to rise in his throat, he saw something warm glowing between the black pines. A cabin. Old wood. Yellow windows. Smoke rising gently from the chimney. The driver stopped his car. Inside the cabin window, two figures stood side by side. A man and a woman. They did not knock. They did not call. They only watched him. And as the driver stared, the woman slowly raised one hand and pointed away from the trees, back toward the road, back toward life. This time the storm let him leave.